Before you took your first breath in this lifetime, something extraordinary had already occurred, far beyond the confines of time, space, and memory. In a realm not bound by physical law, your soul met with wise beings, guardians, perhaps even fragments of yourself, and together you chose, not randomly, not recklessly, but with a clarity that only exists when the veil of forgetfulness has not yet descended. You chose your body, your name, your family, your culture. You even chose the moments of darkness, the losses, the heartbreaks, the illness, the pain. And you chose them not because you desired to suffer, but because you saw what they would awaken within you. This truth, though hidden from our ordinary senses, pulses beneath the surface of every human life. According to the profound insights of psychiatrist Weiss, whose work with past life regression opened gateways to ancient memory and soul wisdom, the soul incarnates not by accident but by profound intention. Each incarnation is a classroom, and each challenge is a sacred teacher. When seen through the eyes of the ego, pain seems cruel, meaningless. But from the perspective of the soul, pain is one of the most precise instruments for growth. It exposes illusion. It crumbles the false identity. It draws us back into remembrance of what we are beyond flesh. Weiss encountered patients who, under hypnosis, recalled lives lived centuries ago and remembered why they had chosen to return. Some had come to complete karmic lessons, others to heal bonds that had once been broken. But a pattern emerged. The soul always returned with purpose, and that purpose was always love, expansion, conscious evolution. So what does it mean to believe, or to even just entertain the idea, that you chose this life exactly as it is? It means that nothing is out of place, that your wounds are not punishments, but portals, that your deepest struggles carry encoded within them the key to your liberation. This realization doesn't eliminate pain, it doesn't bypass grief, but it radically transforms the inner landscape from which you relate to those experiences. It invites you to shift from victim to participant, from someone life is happening to someone life is happening through. And with that shift, power returns. Imagine, even for a moment, that your most difficult relationships were chosen by you, not to torment you, but to mirror the parts of yourself still seeking integration, that the illness wasn't punishment, but a recalibration of energy, a slowing down, so that something deeper might awaken. That the moment you lost everything wasn't an ending, but a silent invitation to remember what cannot be lost. When you begin to remember that your soul agreed to this, that nothing is arbitrary, something extraordinary begins to unfold. Suffering becomes sacred, confusion begins to thin, and life, in all its imperfection, becomes a map back to wholeness. The invitation is subtle, but it's always present. Will you remember who you are beneath the forgetfulness? Will you trust that even your hardest challenges were chosen by the most luminous part of you, the part that never dies? This is not dogma. This is not belief. This is a vibration, a resonance that either speaks to something ancient inside you or it does not. But if it does, stay with me. And if this remembering calls to something deep within you, if you feel the echo of truth in these words, consider subscribing to the channel. This space was created for souls who are ready to awaken, not just to their story, but to the sacred intelligence that wrote it. Every experience we call challenge carries a hidden invitation, not to escape, but to turn inward and recognize the reflection. Life is a mirror. It reveals, again and again, the places within us where light has not yet reached. The pain you resist, the person you clash with, the emotion you avoid, they are all parts of the same holographic message. Look here. This is where you are asleep. It may seem counterintuitive, but the more resistance we feel toward a situation or person, the more fertile the ground is for transformation. Weiss often spoke about the people who triggered us the most, being members of our soul group, beings we've traveled with across lifetimes, bound not by karma as punishment, but by agreements rooted in love, agreements to help each other awaken. That difficult parent, that partner who betrayed your trust, that co-worker who seems to provoke your anger daily, they may all be mirrors, lovingly, though often painfully, showing you aspects of self not yet integrated. Control, abandonment, unworthiness, fear. These are not flaws to be ashamed of. They are signposts, and behind every one is a lesson your soul came here to learn. When you accept that life is not random, you begin to ask new questions. Instead of why is this happening to me, and you begin to wonder, what is this trying to show me? And that single shift in questioning is the spark of consciousness reclaiming its throne. It doesn't mean that suffering becomes easy. It doesn't mean we should remain in harmful environments or tolerate abuse under the guise of spiritual growth. But it does mean we are invited to pause and reflect. What within me is being invited into awareness? What pattern am I ready to dissolve? Weiss witnessed countless clients retrieve memories that reframed their entire understanding of suffering. A woman paralyzed by anxiety remembered a lifetime where she had betrayed another's trust. In this life, her challenge wasn't punishment, it was empathy. It was learning to understand the fragility of the human heart, not as retribution, but as evolution. The soul is endlessly creative in the way it arranges circumstances to meet its goals. But from our limited human perspective, we often see only chaos, until we slow down, until we listen. Have you noticed how certain patterns repeat in your life? The same type of person entering your space, the same wound being touched, the same ending arriving again and again. That's not coincidence, that's curriculum. That's your soul knocking on the same door until you finally open it. And once you do, everything changes. Not because the external world becomes perfect, but because your inner lens has shifted. What once seemed like an enemy becomes a messenger. What once appeared as punishment becomes a path. To live this way is not to deny the pain. It is to walk through it with eyes open and heart present. To remember that every soul who crosses your path is also walking their own labyrinth of forgetting and remembering. And just like you, they are sacred. So the next time life stings, when the old pattern resurfaces, when the trigger flares, take a breath. Ask yourself not how to run, but how to see. What is being reflected here? And what would happen if you met it not with resistance, but with radical compassion? True healing doesn't come from forgetting what hurt us. It arises from remembering, but from a deeper place. Not merely remembering the event, the trauma, the wound, but remembering the soul's perspective behind it. Why did I choose this? What was I meant to learn? Weiss discovered that many emotional and physical ailments stemmed not only from events in this lifetime, but from unresolved energy carried across lifetimes. Phobias, depression, chronic pain, they were often the echoes of something older. And when a person accessed that buried memory through regression, something miraculous happened. The energy shifted. The wound began to dissolve, not because it was fixed externally, but because it was seen through new eyes. Remembrance is medicine. When we remember who we are beyond this single incarnation, the frame widens. Life ceases to be a straight line and begins to look more like a spiral, always circling inward toward integration, toward wholeness. We begin to recognize the patterns, not just as nuisances, but as sacred codes from the soul, clues to the deeper curriculum. There is profound power in asking the question, what part of me is trying to come home through this pain? You don't need to believe in past lives to feel the weight of something ancient inside you. Some wounds carry a heaviness that defies logic. Some fears arrive too early to be explained by this life alone. And sometimes we are born with a longing, a yearning for something that this world cannot name. These are the breadcrumbs of memory left by the soul to guide us back to remembrance. In sessions with Weiss, people recalled lives as healers, warriors, teachers, victims, perpetrators. And in remembering, they realized that all of it, every role, every face, it was in service of balance. The soul isn't here to cling to identity. It's here to experience, to feel, to remember and transcend. What you suffer now may be the final piece in a much older puzzle, and the moment you see it, truly see it, the grip loosens. The pain becomes lighter, because you're no longer lost in the story. You've stepped back into the witness. You've remembered, I am not only this life, I am the presence moving through lifetimes. But how do we cultivate this remembering in daily life? Through stillness, through presence, through questioning our assumptions about what suffering means, through allowing the difficult moments to speak, rather than silencing them with distraction. Each time you pause, not to escape, but to listen, you create space for remembrance to enter. And in that space, the healing begins. Not always suddenly, not always visibly, but subtly, like light filtering through a crack in the wall. This doesn't mean the pain disappears. It means the pain becomes purposeful. You begin to understand why the obstacle came, why the loss occurred, Why that one person entered your life only to leave. And even if the mind doesn't fully grasp it, the soul knows. There's a quiet intelligence beneath all things, a rhythm to your evolution. And when you trust that, even just a little, you begin to walk differently. Not with fear, but with reverence. Not with resistance, but with curiosity. So ask yourself now, not as a thinker, but as a soul, what do I remember? What ancient truth is stirring beneath my pain? And if I allowed myself to listen, what might it reveal? There are moments in life when everything falls apart. The plans fail, the body weakens, the heart breaks. The mind can no longer hold the weight of what was once certain. These are not mistakes. These are initiations. From the surface, they look like endings, but from the soul's vantage point, they are thresholds, sacred ruptures designed to dissolve false layers and reveal what is eternal. Brian Weiss observed that it was often not in success, but in collapse, that his patients touched the deepest truths of their being. The walls they had built to protect themselves, the masks, the narratives, the identities, could no longer hold. And in that nakedness, something ancient emerged, a presence, a remembering, a silence that held everything. When your life unravels, it is not because you have failed. It is often because the soul has outgrown the container. The persona, the job, the belief system, they no longer serve your evolution, and so they fall away. Not to punish, but to make space for what is real. Pain in its rawest form is a revealer. It strips us of pretense. It humbles the ego. It brings us to our knees, not to destroy us, but to bring us closer to what cannot be destroyed. Have you ever noticed that in the moments of your greatest suffering, something paradoxical arises? A stillness, a strange clarity. Even as everything crumbles, there is a quiet place inside that watches, that does not break, that does not speak but knows. That is the soul. Brian Weiss taught that the soul is never confused. The mind might be, the emotions may flood, but the soul remains steady, like a flame untouched by the storm. And when life brings you to the edge, when all the strategies fail, the soul steps forward, not always with answers, but with presence, with essence, with truth. We often resist collapse because we think it means the end of something vital. But what if collapse is the doorway to your most authentic self? What if the very thing you're trying to hold together is the very thing keeping you from freedom? There is grace in letting go. Not in giving up, but in surrendering to the wisdom beneath the chaos, in trusting that even this, especially this, was chosen. Not consciously perhaps, but soulfully. Collapse invites us to meet ourselves without distraction, without the noise of performance, without the illusion of control, just presence, just breath, just being. And in that rawness, something extraordinary begins to happen. Your true self, the self that existed before the story, and begins to emerge. Not because you built it, but because everything else fell away. This is not a philosophy, it is a lived experience, one that Brian Weiss's patients confirmed again and again. When the pain was seen not as cruelty but as calling, their hearts began to open. Not instantly, not easily, but genuinely. And perhaps the same is true for you. Perhaps the moment you are in now, the confusion, the grief, the unknown, is not a detour, but the very path your soul prepared. And if you could soften into it, rather than fight it, something unexpected might arise. Not a solution, but a transformation. So the next time life brings you to your knees, don't rush to stand. Stay there a moment longer. Breathe. Listen. What if this collapse is not your undoing, but your becoming? When you begin to see your life through the lens of the soul, something fundamental shifts. You stop waiting for life to become easier, and instead start becoming more awake. The questions change. The pace softens. You begin to listen more than you strive, and what once felt like chaos starts to feel like choreography. This is not about escaping reality. It is about engaging it more deeply, with eyes that see beneath the surface. Each morning becomes a ritual, each encounter a mirror, each challenge a calling. Brian Weiss often said that remembrance is not an end, but a beginning, a reorientation of how we walk through the world. When you remember that you chose this life, you stop resisting it and start participating in it more fully. And the more you remember, the more power returns to you. Not power over others, but the quiet, sovereign power of alignment. This alignment doesn't mean perfection, it means honesty. It means living from the inside out, letting the truth of your soul inform your actions. It means recognizing when you're asleep and choosing to wake up again and again, because this is the great secret. You're not just here to endure. You're here to evolve, not in spite of the pain, but through it. Not beyond the human experience, but within it, grounded, conscious, open. That argument you had this morning, that decision you're avoiding, that weight you've been carrying in your chest, these are not distractions from your path. They are the path. The soul doesn't ask for grand gestures. It asks for presence, for choice, for love, right in the middle of the mess. And so you begin to choose again. You choose to speak with intention instead of reacting from habit. You choose to pause and breathe rather than chase or escape. You choose to ask the deeper question, what is this moment asking of me? What am I being called to remember now? From this space, life doesn't get easier. It becomes richer, deeper, truer, because now you're no longer waiting to be saved. You're remembering that you are the one who chose to come here, and that you brought with you everything you need to grow, to heal, to evolve. This isn't theory. It's an embodied knowing, one that grows each time you turn inward instead of outward, each time you meet your fear with curiosity instead of judgment, each time you look at your life, especially the hard parts, and say, I see you, I chose you, teach me. Your soul's journey is not linear. It spirals, it deepens. And every time you fall, you are also being called to rise, not as you were, but as something more whole. You chose your hardest challenges not to break, but to open, not to suffer, but to remember. And in remembering, you return to yourself, to love, to the sacred rhythm that moves beneath all things. So as this journey draws to a close, I invite you to take a breath, feel your presence, feel your power, not the power of force, but the power of remembrance. If these words touched your soul, subscribe to the channel and click on the video that just appeared on your screen. It was chosen especially for you. I know you'll love it.